Now, if you live in a Western country, divorce is becoming increasingly more common to the point that very soon it may be the vast majority of marriages end in divorce. And when that comes, in order to fit in and be normal, you may need to destroy your marriage as well. So I thought we could go over some of the many ways that we can destroy a marriage. So the first one is by leaving out a key part of our personality. Now, within the paradigm of the psyche, we have within us the full potential of positive and negative expression of humanity. The full dark and light potential lies within every single human being. The full color range is a part of each one of us. The parts that are very young, the parts that are very old and mature. The parts that are very sensual and sexual, and the parts that are very prudish. There's a very wide range of inner personas. And a persona is something that we develop to cope with a given external context. We'll develop a work persona, we'll develop a persona for being playful, a persona for engaging with parties, and it's a pattern of thinking, feeling, talking, and action that mediates between us and other people and allows us to cope and or to win to some extent in that environment, but also, importantly, express part of who we are. Now, one of the things that we have to deal with in marriage is that the stereotypical image or the archetypal cultural image of what it is to be a good mother, a good father, to be married represents about 25% of the inner psychic terrain. Mothers often have the feeling that they shouldn't be very sexual now that they are a mother, because being sexual and certainly promiscuous does not fit the archetype of being a good mother. And so when you have two people, and not everyone agrees on the right mix, meaning the definition and the archetype of marriage is often a very limited one, as the default, meaning we come into this world with our culture's default. That's what's given to us. And that's what we live by unless we spend time, energy, and effort to create something else, to break from the default. And there's a gravitational pull that is around every default. And the gravitational pull is the fear of the unknown. When you behave to your wife exactly like your father behaved to your mother, there's nothing new about the pattern. And so you do not have to think, you do not have to grow, you do not have to be conscious, and you don't have to face the unknown. You just have to default to what it was like before. Now, if you say, I'm not sure I like that. I didn't like the way my father treated my mother. I didn't like the way my mother lied to my father. I didn't like that. I want a different marriage. Well, first you have to think that you don't like it, and you have to notice that. And then secondly, you have to define what that different marriage looks like to you. And then thirdly, since you can't just copy your parents and create the kind of insanity that is expecting a different result while doing the same thing. Meaning you learn to make pancakes by watching your mom and dad, and you mix milk and flour and eggs and and you get pancakes. Well, even after you decide you want a souffle, a nice buttered croissant and fresh squeezed orange juice, and no, that's my breakfast. You're not going to get a croissant and souffle by mixing flour and milk and eggs and making pancakes. You have to learn a new recipe. Now, learning a new recipe means going into the unknown. And going into the unknown means failure. It means being discomfort. It means facing everything that we fear the most, which always lies in the unknown. And this is a very important thing to understand about this gravitational pull towards certainty. The greatest and most terrible threat that can possibly happen to you is always in the unknown. You cannot imagine it that bad. Now, you can imagine all kinds of stuff, but it's not as bad as it could be because you lack the imagination to know just how bad it can be. But you know it's out there. You know it lies in the unknown, just like every repressed traumatic memory lies in the unknown. And so most of us live our lives consciously or unconsciously running from the unknown. Now, when we're living out of fear, and our deepest fears do reside in the unknown, the goal is to stay familiar. The goal is to stay in familiar terrain. And this is why, despite the mediocrity, despite the stupidity, the insanity, and the cruelty that our family pattern, that our cultural pattern represents, and if you don't see it, it's because you don't want to see it. And if you don't want to see it, it's probably because you don't want to face a reality in which you think that going out into the unknown is a good idea. Because you don't know what's in the unknown, and you don't want to deal with it. This is the beginning of the hero's journey. Referencing Joseph Campbell's work, that unknown space. So we've got a gravitational pull that says stay familiar. And what's familiar is the template provided by our parents and by our culture. Now, it's important to understand this piece because what it says is that if you haven't done your shadow work, you will go insane protecting the known from the terror and chaos of the unknown. Now, it's also worth mentioning that the most luminous possibilities in the history of humankind also lie in the unknown. Being an interplanetary species lies in the unknown. Alien civilizations lie in the unknown. Just about everything you can imagine, dark and light, lies in the unknown. And part of the scientific and the mythological journey is to, in a grounded way, move deeper and deeper into the unknown and make it known. We didn't know what we would find on Mars until we went out there. And frankly, most Martian movies are spooky because in our psyche, we default to the negative. When we don't know something, I mean, the dark is the unknown. Why are children scared of the dark? Because they're scared of what it represents. They're scared of things they don't know. Because on some level, they're smart enough to know that the culture and their family has put secrets there in that dark place. And some of them are ugly. So, back to marriage. Marriage usually represents a small segment of the psyche. 25%, 30%. And not everyone has the exact same match. So you agreed to get married. When your partner's pattern of marriage, well, this would be a conscious marriage. There's lots of unconscious marriages where you get married and then you try and bully your partner into the archetype that makes you feel comfortable. And it makes you feel comfortable because it's safe and it's known. But if it's a different marriage template than your partner, it doesn't make them feel comfortable. So there's a jockeying to see who gets to be comfortable in the marriage. And it's the person who gets to have their template. You see, if I'm a Christian and I go into another country and I say, okay, guys, you have a choice. Let's just put aside the fact that Jesus said don't kill and don't do it. Let's put all that aside for a moment. Here's your choice. I don't want to learn a new religion. I don't want to learn about you and your culture. I don't want to have to sort out what is and isn't true about our different doctrines and texts. So here's the choice I'm going to give you. You can all willingly come and agree to do it my way. And if you do that, I will be comfortable because I know my way and I'm good at it. It's my way. And I will not have to face the unknown. Okay? With us so far? Okay, right? Now, if you don't join me, you give me two choices. One, I'm going to kill you all. And two, I have to go into the unknown and learn something about you. And I don't want to do it. And the good news is I've brought guns, so I can win the war in physical terms. And the beauty is I don't have to learn about you. I don't have to think, I don't have to feel, I don't have to get outside my comfort zone. So who's with me and who wants to be blown to bits with guns? It's a great proposition that simultaneously denigrates and destroys large sections of the psyche's culture, meaning that the psyche, the full expression of humanity, is represented in the 10,000 cultures that have been part of human history. Each culture has a strength. Each culture has a truth of some kind or another. And if you can just destroy that, then you stay safe in the known. Well, the same goes on in a marriage. You may be on vacation and you meet a Muslim woman with a headdress and you think, oh, that's so quaint and interesting, and what is it like? And you learn all these things because you're on vacation. And you have your fantasy, isn't this interesting? Well, wouldn't it be nice if I could take you out of your place and bring you over, and where I could be superior, here we're doing it your way, but where I could be superior, and then you would change every way of doing things to my way, because let's face it, every culture in human history has been clear that their way is better than every other person's way. and America is no different. Every culture in human history has been clear that their way is the best way. The Chinese are clear about that. The Russians are clear about that. The Norwegians are clear about that. 500 years ago, go to any tribe in Africa, hundreds of different tribes, different languages. They're all clear their way is the best way. But it goes deeper than a rational analysis of the best way. The best way is what's familiar, because what's familiar protects you from trauma. And if you can stay out of the traumatic terror of the unknown, then your stress is going to be way more comfortable. You're going to feel safe. You're not going to feel helpless and uncertain. And so the whole jockeying for power to a certain extent is who's going to do things what way. If I do them your way, I'm going to have to venture into the unknown. If you do it my way, you're going to have to venture into the unknown. And you don't know what my parents thought, or maybe we picked each other just because neither of us has to do anything different. We met each other, we saw their parents, and it's so wonderful. I won't have to change and you won't have to change, and we can both remain unconscious and continue the pattern of our parents. So we line up to some degree. And there's usually some tension. There's usually at least 20% gap between my way and your way. No, we're supposed to clean up the dishes immediately after cooking. No, we're supposed to do them 3 hours later after we've had a nice siesta. And so you have the gap. So you've got two tension points, two people's knowns and unknowns. Now, if both people are insecure and scared, this will break the marriage right there. These tiny little differences that suggest that there is a big unknown out there in a psyche that is terrified of that unknown will peevishly hack away at these little differences. You know, the toothpaste lids, this and that, the other. Not because they in and of themselves are that important, but that the idea that there is another way of doing things that is as valid as our own is just too much to digest when it suggests that it might be a good idea that I leave my terrified oasis in familiarity and actually get to know and try out different ways of thinking, feeling, doing, and believing around the world. Now, the next thing that destroys a marriage is, regardless of how simpatico both people's map of marriage is, almost no one has an archetype of marriage that contains more than about a third, maybe 40% of who they are. What that means is that if they seek integrity by integrating with their idea of what a marriage is, there's going to be a majority of who they are and the inner personas they've come to know and feel comfortable with in themselves that have to die, be suppressed, be lied about, or become a secret. So, if Mr. Right pretends he doesn't like watching sports and gambling, but a third of his creative energy is watching sports and gambling, meaning the biggest adrenaline rush for Mr. Right all week is watching sports, but it's the gambling about it, it's the risk that makes him feel alive. And it's that sense of life through the risk that makes him feel that it's worth the slog to make money, etc. But Mrs. Right, little Miss Perfect, doesn't like gambling. Number one. Number two, she doesn't understand Mr. Right's psychology. And she doesn't want to understand Mr. Right's psychology because it would suggest that the world might be bigger than Mrs. Right is comfortable with. Because if there's actually a psychological basis for something like gambling, and just as an aside, a male friend of mine took up cigar smoking. And the ripple effects of his cigar smoking, time away from his wife, building male friendships, meditation, formulating his own ideas, goal setting and visualization, and time in nature, plus additional dental care. He didn't used to take good care of his teeth, but because he didn't want them to yellow, he took excellent care of his teeth. Now, because his male friends didn't nag him, his laughter and his humor went up. And so, I don't think anyone argues that smoking increases the risk of cancer. However, laughter increases health. Resentment also leads to cancer. His resentment went down. The long and short was that when he finally gave up cigar smoking to please his wife, all of that collapsed. Dental hygiene, male friendships, meditation, goals, and resentment soared. Well, do you have a worldview that's big enough to acknowledge there could be something valuable and valid in your partner's way of doing things that isn't direct and that you won't see unless you bother to take the time to learn the psychological terrain and its ripple effects? But that would actually involve knowing your partner. And that would involve expanding your reality. And that would involve going into the unknown. And so it's much easier just to be, in this case, Mrs. Right, and say that out of love for you, I'm not going to stand for you smoking cigars. That's my final word. Well, if the love went a little deeper and said, okay, I'm going to find you another valid social ritual that allows you to do everything that you did before, only what? Whatever it is. And let's transition to that. That would involve expanding both people's worlds and really thinking. So, when a marriage requires the death of personas that are part of the psychological system of health, meaning they're part of the ecology. Without the gambling, there's no incentive to make money. Without the money, there's no house. Without the house, there's no harmonious marriage. And so without the gambling, without a substitute, there's no marriage. Or it's the opposite. Or it's the opposite. Sometimes the marriage can't exist unless there's a transformation of one of the personas. But one of the big reasons that marriages die is when the box is too small within the marriage, And so, in order to be faithful to the idea, the dogma of the marriage, one or both people have to exercise a discipline or a dissociation between big chunks of who they are that they actually like about themselves. I remember a woman, I was considering marriage. She is and was the most exquisite lover of more than 100 women in my entire life. We had phenomenal sex 2 to 5 times every single day and always wanted more. Well, guys are supposed to only be interested in sex if you listen to the little boxes that women put out there. So why did I break it off? There was a good third of my personality that I'd consciously broken away from family and societal norms to develop, that I liked about myself. And it threatened her. Couldn't you dress a little bit more normally? Couldn't you not do this in public? Couldn't you do this? Because what she wanted was someone who would fit into a very traditional box and would make her, as a very traditional woman with a very traditional religion and a very traditional family, it would make everyone feel better if they didn't have to think and feel in any way in order to get to know me. So would I mind not doing this and not doing this? And I thought about what she was asking me to give up. And they were parts of me that I had worked hard to consciously break orbit from our culture, from our dogmas, from family systems. These were the parts I liked about me the most. Now, she didn't like or dislike them. What her concern was that every deviation from societal norms would create discomfort in everyone who was participating in the societal norms, and that she thought that comfort was more important than anything else. And that's not my value system. My value system is that I don't care that no one's paying me to make this video. I don't care that this is not the normal video for an American 43-year-old male with a lovely wife to be making. It's what I want to make. It's what I value. This is the kind of thing she would be mildly uncomfortable every time I did. And in order to please her, it's the kind of thing that I would be tempted to give up so that I could make my woman happy. But what would make her happy is if this part of me died. And I like this part of me. I like the part of me that gets up at 5 a.m, has a dream, has some thoughts, and sits down and shares them with the rest of the world. And I like the thought that 1 or 2 marriages might improve. I like that thought more than I like having sex with the most phenomenal lover of my life. And I couldn't have both. The best sex of my life, or the opportunity to grow into a person that I liked and that I wanted to be, independent of what other people think and feel and make of it. Now, there are still parts of me that miss this woman. And I'm perfectly aware that I may never experience that kind of intimacy again. And I'm perfectly aware, after spending time with more than 100 women, that I may never find someone that brings all those parts together. And I'm very clear, having watched a blossoming of this side of me in the context of the marriage with my wife, that I want to be married to my wife. Because while we don't have sex 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, and where it's not the highlight, my creative expression, a giving birth to something else, is up about 6,000%. The highest it's been with any woman in my life. So then it comes down to value hierarchies, and this comes into the next thing that can destroy a marriage. Let's say you value honesty. Like, if you go into a bank and give them a check for $2,800 and they say, here you go. Do you want to be able to say, look, this is a bank. This is a trustworthy country. This is a trained bank teller. I don't have to count that money. And I don't want to have to second guess every single thing. What I want is a culture where people tell the truth. At least to me, right? So I value honesty. When the car mechanic says, here's your car, I want to know that they didn't just swap out my engine for one with higher mileage and hope I didn't notice anything. No, I value honesty. Every single person values honesty. And what about fun? If you have a choice to have some fun or a choice to be miserable, anyone prefer being miserable? Well, we choose to be miserable for certain reasons, but all things being equal, we'd all like to have fun. So we'd all like everyone to be honest to us. I mean, maybe there's a few exceptions. How do I look? Oh, you look 20 years old and nicer than you've ever looked before. Maybe we like being lied at in certain areas. But we don't like the doctor giving us poison instead of antibiotics, saying take 3 bits of antibiotic and then 10 days later we're dead. No, we like honesty and we like having fun. The problem comes when there's a situation in which you have to decide between being honest and being or having fun. Let's say you're having a fight with your spouse. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to resolve the fight. So you don't want to go home. You're depressed. You're miserable. You can't think clearly. And a cute, handsome something comes over and starts to flirt with you. Now, it's way more fun to engage in that than it is to go back home. But it's not honest, because you have a monogamous agreement with your partner, assuming you do. So what are you going to do? You've got fun and you've got honesty. Which do you value in that situation? Because you have to make a choice. Honesty and trust and trustworthiness and the relationship trajectory that comes from that. And fun, pleasure, etc., and the trajectory that comes from that. Now, if you value fun a little more than honesty, and your partner values honesty a little bit more than fun, then when they inevitably find out, and they always do, they will feel betrayed. Not because you didn't value honesty at all, not because they don't value fun at all, but because they valued honesty more than fun, and you valued fun more than honesty. And in doing so, you betrayed them and the relationship by breaking the container. So you're going to separate. Because whenever one person values something more and different than another, it's not about the values, it's about the sequencing, the priority of the values. Pain will grow. And if that can't be talked about honestly and worked out together, it will undermine the relationship, and the relationship will end. Not because you're a fundamentally bad person, not because they're fundamentally a bad person, but because whenever core values occupy different positions in the value hierarchy, one person always feels betrayed, and because relationships need to deepen and grow to stay alive, they become more and more vulnerable if they are living relationships. And you cannot grow and stay alive in the presence of core betrayals of core values, because there's too much pain to keep growing and being vulnerable. And without growing and being vulnerable, the relationship dies. And with the death of the relationship, the magic dies. So whether you live together for 50 years or not, you are no longer in a living, dynamic marriage. So we have betrayal or priority hierarchies. So, what is a marriage? Well, we've already looked at personas and deaths and personas and things like that. And one way to look at that might be, let's take this tree here. So a tree is 1 year old and it has a ring of bark. Now it's 2 years old. And if you cut the tree down, you'll see the history of the growth of that tree. You will see a record of each year in which that tree has been alive. It's a bit like a memory, a physical memory. Now we have a psychological memory. We have a record, a living record. There's a 2-year-old inside each one of us. There's a 3-year-old, there's a 4-year-old, there's a 5-year-old. There's the masculine expression of that 5-year-old and the feminine expression of that 5-year-old. Meaning there's a little girl and a little boy in each one of us. And it doesn't go away because we're older. Now, if you pay attention in any group of people, if you pay attention, you will see the inner ages presenting themselves in different contexts. And if you pay attention to yourself, you will notice that your emotional age changes. I feel 5-year-olds and very small right now. Oh, I don't want to be 5-year-old and I don't want to feel small, so I'm just going to block that out. Sure, you can block it out, but if you pay attention, if you're not afraid to look in that domain, you will see a migration of inner ages. These exist within the inner map, meaning your inner 5-year-old has an opinion about your partner, as does your 7-year-old, as does your 12-year-old. They have an opinion about your partner, and not just about the partner as a de facto, lump of fact. Your partner is changing. Your 5-year-old likes cuddling with your partner but hates listening to her criticize you. Your 10-year-old is attracted to the 12-year-old in your partner, but not so much to the 40-year-old. The 2-year-old is terrified and in shock when your partner shouts and breaks a plate. But the teenager may enjoy a good fight and provoke them. Go on, break another plate. Maybe the teenager is fed up about feeling that they don't matter. And the more plates you break, the more they get, okay, I matter. He was willing to break 5 plates. I've still got it. I can still piss him off. He must care about me to some degree, even if it's just to hate me. That's what I wanted, so that's why I egged him on. Okay, 16-year-old inside is very happy. 2-year-old is terrified. 5-year-old is cowering and doesn't know if she's lovable. 30-year-old is saying, when are we ever going to stop egging this guy on? Do you want to destroy the marriage? No, that is the marriage for the 16-year-old. The 16-year-old wants to feel that they are important and is terrified of emotion. Well, having plates flying around does the trick. There's no emotion, and there's a lot of intensity, and there's importance. I'm the center of the universe right here. I got what I want, and I said what I'm going to say, and no one's going to stop me. Well, that's what the 16-year-old wants. So the 16-year-old is in a marriage. With what? Some part in the partner. Okay, so what's going on there? In any relationship, in any moment, within this whole map of the psyche, within all the inner ages, some parts are happy and some parts are not. Now, one reason the relationship ends is if you like a good fight and your 16-year-old likes to provoke your partner into some degree of violence. For the sense of power, it gives a disempowered 16-year-old, a frustrated person who doesn't feel heard. So they'll stay in the relationship. I like this. I've got someone I can make pissed off as hell anytime I want. That's what I want. Plus, I get to punish men, and I've always wanted to do that. And so this is good for me. Okay, we're going to be in this marriage for a long time. But what if your partner says, I'm not interested in being punished. I don't want to fight with you. If you want to hear and be heard, just tell me what you have to say. Well, what if the 16-year-old feels shy? Maybe you'd laugh at me. Maybe you'd criticize me if I just say what I have to say. Maybe she does. But if she won't say it cleanly and honestly, maybe the other person, the adult, maybe it's a 40-year-old watching this dynamic and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. You've never told me what you want. You don't lead with that. You wait till I'm stressed and vulnerable, and then you attack. And then you enjoy me losing control of my temper. But you see, that's you. And there's another woman over here who doesn't do that. Who just says, honey, could you make me a card right now and write 7 appreciations? Because that would make me feel really important. And some part of me doesn't feel important right now. And I can say, I'm exhausted from work, but within 2 hours, your card will be made. I'm going to veg in front of the TV. I'd like you to massage me and hear about my day. And in 2 hours, your card will be made. Well, that person can advocate for their 16-year-old a little bit more directly and cleanly. What if someone wants that kind of a marriage? No, the marriage ends. See, the mathematics of marriage are 1 plus 1 equals 2 and equals the synergy that is the marriage. Now, it takes 2 people or more to create a marriage. It takes 1 person to end it. That's how easily that equation falls apart. I don't even think you can see it up there, but you get the idea. 1 plus 1 equals not only 2, but the synergy that is bigger than both combined. And when one person decides to leave, the other person is no longer married. And the synergy collapses. The third energy that is bigger than either one no longer exists. The marriage dissolves. It takes 2 to say yes and 1 to say no. It's fragile, in other words. Because you can't begin a marriage without cooperation, but you can end one without cooperation. So, one of the phenomena is a dynamic in which one person is very happy because they're getting their needs met, and so they want the marriage to continue. But the other person is not. The other person is not at all happy, and person A isn't listening. So person B leaves. Now person A will be very upset because person A wants the other person to stay on board and suffer so that they can get their needs met. I need this and this and this. You're meeting those needs, so I want to be married to you. Now you need this, this, and this, and I'm not meeting those needs, so you don't want to be married to me. Well, I don't want to have to do the work to learn what you need. And even if I learn what they are, I don't want to have to do the work to actually do those and meet those needs. So what I'd rather do is just make it really hard for you to end the marriage you don't want to be in. Imbalances of power, domestic violence. There's plenty of prostitutional relationships. But ultimately, every relationship is fragile. It takes one person to walk away. And a marriage is maintained by an equation, which is pleasure at being in marriage minus pain at being in marriage equals net value. Pain of leaving marriage minus pleasure of leaving marriage equals net incentive. So for example, here's a typical equation. I resent my husband, and I enjoy joking with him a few times a week. My net pleasure or my net value might be 2. Now, the pain of leaving the relationship, I have to move, I have to make more money, I have to deal with our friends, I have to talk about my feelings, I have to figure out what I want, I have to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. So we've got a lot of pain there because I don't want to do any of that. But there's pleasure also. Gee, I could actually create a living relationship. I could do something else. So there's pleasure. And this entire equation for each person determines whether they stay or not. And both people have to answer this equation. The combination of the value of staying with its pluses and minuses and the value of leaving with its pluses and minuses. If both people do not answer that equation, the marriage is over. Now, to affect that equation, you can do a couple of things. One thing that low-value partners do is threaten their partners. They threaten their partners to increase the pain if they leave. I'm going to kill myself if you leave me. Well, they haven't added any value to the relationship. In fact, the value might go down. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm trapped now. So the value is lower now. But the pain value of leaving is now way higher. I'm going to have to think, is there anything I could have done? Okay, now I'm with another crappy partner, or I'm alone and lonely. So someone's dead, and can I really guarantee that I can can improve the equation? So that's pain there. But you also know that someone who's threatening that is a little bit unstable. So if they're unstable, what else does that mean? Maybe they'll track me down. Or, then you have other things. I'll kill your dog. Go ahead, leave. I'll kill your dog. You're increasing the pain around leaving while not increasing the value of staying. So that works, meaning you just have to fiddle around with this net equation for both people. Now, it works to keep people together. It doesn't work to create love. Now, to understand that, you actually have to know what love is, and you have to know the different levels of love. You have to be able to distinguish the love of the child, attachment, possessiveness, from the love of the adult, I want what is best for you. Now, the only kind of love in the book that is mature adult love puts your partners, the person you love, puts their happiness above your selfishness. In other words, if you're loving someone from a mature place where the friendship is stronger than the romantic lust attachment dynamic, because otherwise you're just dealing with some range of attachment, pleasure, obsession, lust. Nothing wrong with it. It's wonderful. But it's not love. It's fixation, whatever. It's all kinds of things. Cocaine is not love. It's attachment, fixation, etc. And so the only mature love out there is the love that says, first of all, I care about you enough to see you. Secondly, I care enough about you that I want you to be happy. Thirdly, I care about you enough that I want to know if I'm making you happy or not. Fourthly, I care about you enough that I do my best to make you happy. And fifthly, I care about you enough that if you'd be happier alone or with someone else, I'm going to support you to do it. Why? Because mature love is the exalting in another person's growth, development, and well-being. It's the bringing out of their best qualities, their best self. And a mature and secure person, an adult, who loves what is good, beautiful, and true in their partner, and that's why they're attracted to them, feels grief if they are the reason that blossom doesn't open. That's adult love. And what is the action and behavior of love? It is participating in that person's life in a way that creates security, pleasure, survival. Love and belonging, supporting their sense of self-esteem, helping them develop their unique gifts, helping them grow and find their place in the world. That is to love someone. And love can be one way, very easy and often is. When you're loving a child, you're behaving in a way that facilitates a child to actually grow up and become an adult. You're loving some 20-something, infatuated. They may not be able to love you. They're too self-absorbed. But if they can, the question they're asking themselves is, what will bring you joy and well-being? What will help you grow and develop? Now, when that's the question, and you think that the other person will benefit from leaving, you don't threaten them so that they'll stay. That's pouting, manipulation, attachment. Now, it may be pouting, manipulation, and attachment to get something that you want from them. You want to fuck them. You want them to make you look good. You want their money, whatever it is. It's not love. It's ego agenda, and damaging love is saying, you don't really matter to me. What matters is that I get what I want. Now, if you really love someone, you don't let them manipulate you. Because that's not helping them be their best self. It's not helping them grow to create for themselves so that they don't need to steal from someone else. Someone's got a nice house and you want it, you can go over and take it. Kill him. Or you can do the hard work of building a nice house. In which case you have to grow. You have to learn. You have to save the money to learn all the skills involved with building that house. But this is the equation of staying together. And you want to move that equation by cooperating together to create more and more value on the upside, while simultaneously making it easy on the downside. My wife and I have an ending agreement. If I want to end or she wants to end any time, we already have an agreement of this will happen and this will happen and this will happen and this will happen, and it's in writing. And it's an agreement that creates a gentle transition and leaves both of us stronger than when we began. We don't have to use it. We can stay together for the rest of our lives. But what that gives me is I know my wife is never going to be with me out of fear of the unknown or fear of retaliation. Because regardless of how I might feel in different moments, I keep my agreements. So, this equation weakening, low value, incentives to leave, it'll end if even one person deals with that. And it's an easy thing to do because when you have relationships that reward each other for lying, how are you? I'm fine. Is everything okay, honey? Yes, it's wonderful. You want to talk right now? No, I'm busy. Great. I'm so glad you don't want to include me in your world because I'm self-absorbed in my own world. I just asked those out of the mere courtesy of pretending to be polite, and now I'll go watch my football game. And you know I don't want to hear the answer, and that's why you lied to me. And that's also why I don't know what's going on, which is also why I haven't understood that the relationship has been losing 50% of its value for you for the last year, which is why I'm shocked. How could you possibly, after saying it was fine for a whole year, end the relationship? Well, I'm ending the relationship because I don't want to keep lying, and I know you want to hear it's fine because you want to watch football. You've never lit up at the chance to hear about my feelings, and so I don't share them with you. So you don't know what they are, and they haven't been improving. So I'm leaving to find someone who actually lights up when I talk about my feelings. Oh, but I would, if you'll just talk about your feelings now and then I'll go back to watching sports next week. It's like, no, I actually want someone who wants to hear the feelings. They don't just listen to them as a last-ditch effort to avoid facing the unknown because you don't know what you're going to do with yourself and you don't want to figure that out, and so you'd like me to stay around so you don't have to. Gosh, why do we have to, you're talking about all that, you're thinking about all that, well, you don't have to talk to anyone like that. You can sit and watch your game and pretend that nothing's happening. And I'm going to give you that freedom. Well, this is why relationships end. Lies. Particularly lies that are rewarded by someone who doesn't want to know. So here's a good start. You can end your marriage for all of these reasons. You can end a relationship. You don't even have to get married. It's, of course, much harder to co-create and give birth to a beautiful relationship and sustain and grow it. It's much harder than to end a relationship. But if you want to be normal, here's a good place to start.